shall we talk about the guy who is next for a moment here and what's going to be different with him? Um, and that's Jürgen Klopp. Jürgen Klopp has been really good at pointing out that he doesn't have the DFB job yet, but then also in every one of his television appearances during the World Cup, also already outlining the plan of what he's actually going to do with this Germany team. And then that gets us full circle to Thomas Tuchel and Julian Nagelsmann and the Spain team that just won the World Cup. And he said something really interesting on Magenta TV following the World Cup victory by Spain. He said, "There's a team of almost no Barcelona and Real Madrid players." And he's right. I mean, the majority of players come from Atletico Madrid, I think, and then they're from all over the place. Um, Lamine Yamal only being the one standout, right, from Barcelona. And I think his point was that the Spain team was put together by the most informed players playing in Spain, who could best transport the culture and the playing style that they wanted to play to the national team level. And I think Jürgen Klopp is going to run very contrary to both Thomas Tuchel and Julian Nagelsmann in that I think he will try to do the same with Germany with a very different playing style, because I think Germans just don't play like Spain. I think there's a completely different element. But I thought his point was really interesting because what it made me think about is that, like, yeah, of course you still have to rely on 3-4 Bayern players because that's still where a lot of the best German players play. But I think his point of we just have to go and find the best players for every single position that we want to have, and just go with that and stick with them over a 4-year period. I thought it was really really quite fascinating, and it points to me towards him going to young players that can 100% play the roles that he wants, similar to what he did with Dortmund, right, with the likes of Großkreuz, and just stick in there and rely on them no matter what as well. Which, by the way, Spain did, right? I'm looking at someone like Porro, where I'm like, what the heck? What is he doing playing for Spain? And here he is, a World Cup winner. Or Unai Simon is another example, right? I hear this from Arsenal fans all the time. It's like, why is Raya not playing? It's because Unai Simon is just better for the system. Yes, he's perfect for the system. And I think, finding these players that are perfect for your system and sticking with them, no matter what, I think is going to be something that Jürgen Klopp is definitely going to do. And it's going to be very counter to what Julian Nagelsmann and Thomas Tuchel have done and with their respective national teams.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little down on the German national team at the moment in time and their kind of future prospects. I think it's probably the weakest group of players since I started covering German football. Admittedly, I got into it just as that wave of new players were coming through and they won the World Cup. So a little spoiled, I suppose. Like I'm sure you could go back to like the 80s or something like that, or certain stages of the 90s and say that.
Intersect there, because I was caught in this doom and gloom too. Football goes really quick. Like, it's a cycle that people are saying, like, oh, Germany will never be at this level again. I'm like, we said the same after Spain crashed out in 2014 after they had won so dominantly in 2010. Spain had, this is the first time that Spain reached a semi-final of a tournament since 2010. For years after that,
you're right.
they were not there. Like, football can move so quick. And we can be sitting here in 2 years and saying, like, holy crap, there's a lot of really good German players all of a sudden. Where did they come from? It's like, well, maybe they have a manager now that actually trusts them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I was going to add a but to that just to kind of quantify it all. And what I would say is that, Germany aren't Spain. And, as I said at the top of the show, there's this Goliath behind every Spain victory that kind of lurks in the shadows, and it is that kind of system and the tiki-taka and the style of football which has been played at every academy. And I don't know if Germany has that. It has something akin to, which is obviously gegenpressing, is the name of this podcast, which is what most academies play. Almost every academy plays, is what every club plays. I'd argue that a lot of clubs don't play particularly well in the Bundesliga, like they used to anyway. I think a lot of clubs just go through the motions, or a lot of head coaches go through the motions, but there's no denying that the players are taught that. So to an extent, Klopp could kind of emulate what Spain have done in the sense of saying, well, every German player who comes to play for the national team should know how to play gegenpressing because they've all been learning how to do it since they were kids. And through that, he probably could put together a team in a similar way to De La Fuente's done with Spain, in the sense that it's not really about star players. It's not about accommodating the best players. It's about finding the right fit for the full starting 11. And that's, as you said, when you start getting like your Kevin Grosskreutz and things like that, and your Andrea Schürrles and players of that ilk into the team, who maybe wouldn't be the most viable players of the team or the biggest stars, but the ones who will do a job. And that's always kind of been Klopp's secret power, in the sense he can get players to kind of run through brick walls for him. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see if that's what he goes for, and whether he can kind of galvanize a new generation of German players to kind of do that for him, which I think would be fascinating.
Can I counter that as well? Because when you look at the youth levels, the only country that has kept pace with Spain has been Germany. Whether that's at the U17, the U19, the U21, Germany at all those levels consistently reaches finals and wins tournaments, including the recent U17 World Cup. So I would say actually the talent is there. I think the bigger issue is that the talent isn't being played. And as you said, I also think that I agree with you that a lot of clubs don't play the system really well. But then they reach a national team, and the national team plays a different system.
Yeah, I'd also caution. I always tend to caution that kind of that kind of, because I hear a lot in Scotland as well, because people say, oh, we always have such good youth players coming through, and the Scotland youth teams always do quite well, and people say, why doesn't it translate to success at senior level? And the honest answer is that youth football and senior football are two very different things. And a lot of players just simply get chewed up and spat out when they try and make the step up to senior football. And that's when you do kind of need to have not just quality young players, but the quantity of quality young players that only a handful of nations are really capable of doing. And unfortunately, it's almost all countries grouped in Western Europe, in the sense that it's France, it's Spain, it's England, it's Germany, it's Belgium, Portugal, because these countries have the facilities, they have the wealth, they have the they have the players, or the young children who are able to kind of take part in these activities. So they kind of have that national pool of players. So yeah, I'm sure Germany won't struggle for young players going forward. And I'm sure Klopp could probably.
I don't think the quantity of young players is the problem. I think it's what you just said there. That's the key, that they don't get churned up when they make the transition. And that's about opportunities. And I think what a lot of the smaller clubs do really poorly, and I think actually at the bigger clubs, seeing that change, because Bayern Munich has promoted quite a lot of young players recently. So I need to take them out of this equation. They go to France and buy a cheap guy rather than trusting two guys from the academy. And I think that is a really big issue. And I think the problem here is that Bundesliga clubs are almost too rich. So they can't help themselves. They need to spend that money. And I think what I would like to see is for that to stop. And rather than buying a powerful forward from France, maybe give the powerful forward in your youth academy a chance instead.
And that requires kind of joint up thinking, which we've not really seen since, Das Reboot. And I think it has. We've been very critical of it on this podcast and the newsletter for a number of years now. And we've kind of poked fun at, the Freiburgs, the Gladbachs, and the Frankfurts of this world, who would rather just hop across the border and scoop up some Ligue 1 young player rather than developing their own players, because they're now in this kind of vicious cycle of always having to make money in the transfer window. I mean, I put in our group chat, there's a story today about Schalke and them complaining about the lack of TV revenue and they're getting this season, the Bundesliga, and saying that the TV revenue system has to be reevaluated. And I don't want to kind of get into it because I know we have to wrap up this podcast, but it's an example of how, if you actually look at the revenue streams that German clubs have to rely on, it's actually quite limited. And you can see a lot of clubs, and I think Frankfurt are the perfect example of this. They sat down and said, the only way we're really going to be able to catch a Dortmund or a Leverkusen or Leipzig in this current environment is to sell players and make, 50, 60, 70, 100 million euros a summer from selling players. And obviously, from a business point of view, it makes a lot more sense just to scoop up players from France and sell them rather than a 5 or 10 year strategy of developing German players. So the financial incentive isn't there to develop their own players. The financial incentive for most clubs in the Bundesliga is just to scout young players from France or Belgium or wherever and sell them on to the Premier League. And
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder if German football has to sit down and maybe reevaluate that if they want to, as you said, kind of make more pathways for young players to develop.
Can I take that one step further? And I credit Thomas Müller for saying this actually yesterday on television. I thought it was quite smart. He said that young German players who now play in Germany should think twice about maybe jumping to the riches of the Premier League right away if they want to really further their career. And then he pointed to Florian Wirtz and Nick Woltemade in particular and said, was it really a good thing for their career to go to England when they did? And where would Germany be if Nick Woltemade had maybe stayed for another year in Stuttgart and been in top form, and Florian Wirtz had maybe stayed in Germany in Leverkusen for another year and be in top form? The story might be different as well, because all of a sudden you have guys who play in the Bundesliga in top form, go to the World Cup, and don't be a shell of their former selves. And he knows this because he still grew up in an environment in the Bundesliga where young German players didn't go abroad right away, or never really, right? So I think that is actually something else that they have to look at. Like, how can the Bundesliga keep its German stars once they develop them? Is, I think, a really, really important discussion point as well, because I don't think it's really good for player development, because I think Florian Wirtz and Nick Woltemade are good enough for the Premier League, but to make a cultural change is really hard on a young person's life. And it's not always the right thing for your career.
Yeah, and to loop it back towards Klopp, we've been talking about this as well. We're now at a stage now where Premier League clubs are raiding the Zweite Bundesliga for young talents before they've even really played half a season. And the troubling thing there is, as you said, if these kids don't have the opportunity to come through playing German football, playing a German style of football, and then they get sent off to academy in Manchester or Brentford or whatever, then by the time it comes for them to play for the national team, there's no identity there. And they don't know. So as we just talked about there, if Klopp's whole concept is to develop a national team of everyone playing gegenpress, and if he's calling on 5 or 6 players who've been playing in England since the age of 19 or 20, they might not know what that means. They'll only know how to play Premier League football, which, as we've seen from England, doesn't really bring a lot of success at international level. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. We don't really have the answers, obviously, on this podcast, but we're interested to see how things go going forward under Klopp and what direction he takes the national team in.